This is Ask Joe number. $167. Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome to the Home Studio Corner podcast. My name's Joe Gilder. If you haven't connected with me on the social media things, come find me. Joe Gilder Music is the handle I use. That intro, for those of you who aren't live with me on Meerkat, was acoustic guitar, run through a distortion, and then per the request of, who was it? Mr. Buell on Meerkat, I did beatboxing over the top. So you got a really rare look into my skills as a beatboxer. Anyway, how are you? I hope you're doing well. This is the second episode this week as promised, and I'm stoked about that. And this one actually will be on YouTube. The other one I put on YouTube. I had to take it down for reasons I'll probably never talk about, but now this one I can put on. There was a thing. Just trust me, there was a thing. But this one will be on YouTube, so now you can listen on your podcasting platform of choice, or you can watch and listen on YouTube, and you get to see what's happening on screen, which is actually, to me, fairly interesting, because I'm essentially producing this live as I record it, which means Studio One is really cool. It lets me drag audio around while it's recording. So if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you can see I'm actually moving. This is the transition audio that takes me from the intro section, the soliloquy section, into the Q&A section. And whenever I'm done soliloquizing, I can move that to there and kind of time it. So I used to have it exactly at 10 minutes, and now I'm thinking, you know what? I can just do this. So I don't have to be limited. If I need to talk a little bit longer, I can. If I'm going to go short, I can. I just got to click and drag. Interesting thought, especially as it relates to how that could apply to like live production. And then over here on the right-hand side, this is my outro music. As you can see, it fades in really quiet. And then where it jumps to really loud volume is where I need to stop talking by then. So if I'm on my last question, and I know I've got about 40 seconds or so here to wrap it up before that hits, and I can drag that where it needs to go too. So anyway, this is fun for me. I hope it's fun for you and somewhat interesting. And somebody on Meerkat says, if Ed Sheeran can beatbox, so can Joe Gilder. So take that, Ed. Ed, you should come on the show. Come hang out with me. That'd be fun. Okay, so today I want to talk about something that I mentioned briefly in the last episode, and I want to dedicate a segment to this because it's really important to me. It's a really big deal. It's something I'm really excited about, and apparently, just from looking at the feedback I've gotten, what little bit I've talked about it online, it seems like it's really resonating with people and getting people like you fired up. So I'm going to start this. If you're driving, then ignore this. But otherwise, if you're at a computer or can get to one, check out the web address, roadtotheryman.com. That's road, R-O-A-D, to the Ryman, R-Y-M-A-N.com. This is a little, just simple little website that I set up a couple weeks ago. And it's going to it's basically a placeholder for me to document, for me to document my process of moving towards this goal that I've had for a long time, which is to play a show at the Ryman Auditorium here in Nashville. If you're not familiar with the Ryman, it's not the biggest venue, it's not the fanciest venue, but it's a really cool venue. It's an old church building that just has this vibe to it. And I've always wanted to play it, and I'm very excited to document this journey. Will I play there one day? I don't know. A lot of that's probably beyond my control, but there's a lot I can be doing to move myself towards that goal. And the first couple of things being, when I first had this goal, I realized I need to release some more original music. So I released Better This Way, which is a 13-song album. I released Free, which is a 4-song EP. And now the next step for me is putting a band together. So I've got a full band, drums, bass, guitar, keys, 2 guitars, keys, and a female harmony singer. And we've got a rehearsal space. We're just working on schedules to get together and start rehearsing and then book shows and do all that kind of stuff. So I have more questions than I have answers, and I honestly don't know anything about booking shows and how to go about doing all this. So it's going to be a big learning experience for me. I'm going to be asking a lot of advice of people and help from people and connecting with more musicians and things like that. But I'm starting to connect with, I feel like I was made to make music, and my music may not be the best music in the world, but I feel like I need to share it. And I feel like I'm making stuff that needs to be out there. And I feel like I want to do a lot more music for me. And playing the Ryman would be a nice cherry on top. So if you are interested in following that journey, I'm sure I'll be talking about it here on the podcast, but specifically everything related to that will be at that website. It's just at my Tumblr site, which is joegildermusic.tumblr.com. But if you go to roadtotheryman.com, that'll redirect you there. So I'm really pumped about that. I hope it makes you pumped, because it makes me pumped. And I don't know. I was telling a friend about this the other day, and this is a friend who has played the Ryman many times in the band. He's played bass usually with various acts throughout the years. He's played lots of great venues. He's played the Ryman. And even he said, this sounds risky and makes me fired up to see it happen for you. And it may never happen, like I said, but I feel like I would have regrets if I didn't try to pursue it. And I know to a certain percentage of you, I'm going to come off as the wide-eyed, newbie, hopeful musician moved to Nashville. I'm just 20 years late, and that's okay, because it may be super optimistic, but to me, it's got me excited. It's got me something to aim for musically, and I feel like in a lot of ways, I've been kind of spinning my wheels musically. I feel like I've channeled a lot of my music into Home Studio Corner, which is really cool that I have this place to share it in that way. But the music's kind of always been on the back burner. It's always been a secondary thing, and I want to make it more of a primary thing, more of something, because it really does my soul good to make music. And when I'm not making music, I just don't quite feel like me. And that's going to look like a lot of things in 2016 and 2017 and 2018, but I'm excited about where this journey is heading. Scared out of my gourd, but also excited. So I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll let me know what your Ryman is. I want to know what some big, hairy dream that you have that maybe you've not allowed yourself to pursue. And maybe this is me giving you permission to say, screw it, I'm going to go after this thing, even if I fall on my face, because what an adventure, right? If I completely miss and I have this great adventure in the meantime, to me, that's a good story and a good life. And maybe it'll turn into a good book one day. I don't know. I can't see into the future, but I know the fairly immediate future things that I want to do, and this would be one of them. So I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll follow it, and I hope you'll cheer me along. Boom. Excellent. So now we're on to the part of the show where I answer your questions about music and audio and studios and life. You can ask questions over on Twitter, twitter.com/JoeGilderMusic. Also Facebook. That's a website you may have heard of before. Go to facebook.com/JoeGilderMusic, and you can ask questions there as well, which is where I'm pulling most of the questions for today. I asked it earlier, and folks were super awesome and posted a bunch of super awesome questions, and I'm going to pull those super awesome questions in here for today. So the first up is Wes Deloach. Now, Wes, I was looking for my phone. It's right in front of me. Wes is asking, I'm thinking about buying an 11 rack to avoid the latency problems that come with using plugins. What do you think about yours? Well, as you may know, my most recent albums have been predominantly the 11 rack. Specifically, the EP Free that I did, all the guitars, I'm fairly certain, if not all, then a good chunk or most of them were done through, the 11 rack. And I love it. I remember when Graham Cochran got one, and I know you guys probably think he and I are trying to be the same person. When he and I first got one, it was pretty exciting. And I'm sorry, let me start over. When he got one, I thought it was lame. I thought, come on, it's a box, it's a plug-in, it does amps, it's going to sound awful. But he kept raving about it. And then he released some music, and I liked the sound of that. And so that was kind of cool. And then I finally broke down and got one, and I really like it. So here's the thing. If you're looking for a box that sounds exactly like a Marshall half stack and exactly like a Fender Reverb and exactly like a Vox AC30. Well, you're not going to get that. But to me, that's not a problem. I just want a box that sounds good and has a lot of different sounds in it. Because to be completely honest, I'm not going to go buy $10,000 worth of guitar amps so that I have different tones available. Boutique amps are great. If that's your thing, go for it. But for me, I want diversity and I want something that's reasonable. To me, something like the 11 rack is that. Is it the best guitar amp emulator out there? No. But I'm able to get really cool tones out of it. And at the end of the day, a big chunk of how things turn out for you when you do guitars is how you are as a player and the tone you hear in your head. Because I make the 11 rack sound kind of like I want. And a lot of people using amp simulators go way too far. They crank up the gain, they crank up the drive, and they think it sounds good, and it just doesn't. So my advice to you, Wes, is go for it. I think you can get it used on eBay for a couple $100, and it's a cool piece of gear. I don't use the digital component of it at all. I don't plug it in via USB. I just literally run audio cables out of the back into my interface and use it as an outboard piece of gear. Great piece of gear, and I'm not endorsed by them. Honestly, it's not like I'm a huge fan of Avid in general, but this one they did really well, and I like it, and it works well. Alec Kowalski, one of my VIP members, says, how often do you use Melodyne and the one that comes with Studio One Pro? And if you do use it, how do you know when to stop or when to not overdo it? I almost never use tuning software. Part of it's laziness. Part of it's I would rather, if it's me singing, I'd rather just go sing it again. And I don't have perfect pitch, and I'm not the best singer in the world, and I don't have the best pitch as a singer. And sometimes I leave pitchy stuff in there because that's more real, or maybe I'm just lazy and I don't want to go do it. So I almost never open it up. So that's for that. And I know that people tell me all the time that's not a great answer, because what if I work with musicians who just aren't as good as singing as the professionals that you tend to work with or whatever? And I get that, but I think you might be missing the point. Maybe the point is don't work with really bad musicians. And then you'll say, yeah, but that's all that's available to me in my area. And I say, bullcrap. There are great musicians everywhere. You just don't know how to find them. So those are my thoughts. That being said, I'm not against tuning software. I think it can be a great tool to polish up a good performance and to take something that's otherwise perfect but has some pitchiness and fix it. Excuse me. But other than that, I just don't have a lot of opinions on it. I just don't personally like it. I don't personally use it, I guess. So there you go. As far as overdoing it, I would only use it in specific spots where I hear a problem. If I was using Auto-Tune or Melodyne, I wouldn't go through every single note and see how it maps out on the grid. I would listen. And if one spot sounded bad, I'd go in and fix that spot and move on. That's the best advice I can give you. Scott Bennett says, I've been trying an old school analog calendar in order to increase productivity. Do you find that the key to making it work is looking at the calendar every day? Yeah, whether you use, and I've talked a lot about this with my VIP members, whether you use a digital calendar, which is what I use, the iCal on my computer and my phone, or a physical calendar, it doesn't really matter if you're not looking at it and you're not updating it. So for me, I regularly have my days explode. Sick kids, sick wife, something comes up, I've got to not do what I had scheduled. So for me, if I don't look at the calendar, then I don't readjust and reschedule things and rebook things. Then I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. And historically, flying by the seat of my pants doesn't work very well for me because I forget a lot of things, or I just end up kind of spinning my wheels aimlessly because I don't have any direction. So whether it's a physical or digital calendar, I don't care. I really like the idea of a paper calendar. My schedule changes so much, and there's so many things that happen with having small children and working from home, and just all the different balls that I have in the air, it makes it to where it's fairly not feasible for me to have a schedule that stays put, which I imagine is pretty typical of most people. So for me, a digital calendar is better because if my day gets blown up, I can just click and drag things and move them around versus having to scratch things out and start over. But I love a really good pen and a piece of paper is one of my favorite things in the world. So if you're digging it, dude, I say go for it. And the downside of a digital system, whatever it is, and this goes for working on music as much as it does keeping a calendar, is because you can copy and paste and move things with literally no consequences, it's easy to make that your norm. So you schedule things, but you never really intend to do them. You always in the back of your mind know if you don't feel like it, you're going to move things around and reschedule yourself all the time. I fall prey to that a lot. Versus if perhaps writing it down on a piece of paper, but first of all, if it's in ink, maybe it causes you to think twice before writing it down and make sure it's something A, you really want to do, and something B, that you're allocating enough time for. It's really easy to click and drag an iCal and create a 2-hour block to mix a song, but maybe mixing a song in 2 hours isn't actually realistic. Something about writing it down might make you think about it a little bit more and may help you rethink things. The other side of that coin is if you write it down and you know if you move it, you've got to like scratch it out and make your calendar ugly. That's a little bit of motivation to just do what you plan to do. Now, interruptions happen, and for me, I know, for example, it takes me an hour to do this podcast. If I need to move it, I know it's an hour. So if I want to throw 8 things on my calendar for the day and rearrange them into a way that works well for me that day, to me, that's easier than writing out the list and then deleting that or scratching it out and writing it again once I get a better system. So anyway, total nerd alert. But I love this stuff. So good question, Scott. I knew you were a nerd. Michael Jensen, my brother, how do you get over writer's block? I've been scheduling time and following my schedule, but the past several months, nothing has been coming to me. I'm a songwriter. It's what I do, and I think I'm pretty good. I put out an album that I love and have been writing my whole life, but lately I've got nothing. How do you push through when you're in a long funk? Man, I'm such a sporadic writer. I'll do silly things like write 50 songs in 12 weeks, and then I won't write for 6 months, and then I'll write 4 songs and put them on an EP, which is essentially what I did last year and the year before, the last 24 months. Anyway, I've not really experienced the funk thing because I typically, if I'm in a funk and the writer's block, I just stop writing, right? I don't think that's a great advice. So what I would do, and things that have helped me write, have generally been when I'm forcing myself to really think through things I'm dealing with. Songs I write that really connect with people generally have some sort of message that they connect with. That doesn't mean it can't be a fun song. If you listen to my latest EP, the first 2 songs are just really, really fun, but they actually talk about stuff that I was wrestling with and thinking about, and there's a core message there that I've been thinking through and working through. One of the best things for me, and this gets back to nerdy pen and paper, but I love writing down things in a journal and just thinking on paper. It helps me clarify things. It helps me think of one thing at a time and think more linearly than the chaos that's typically there in my brain. So if I have a particular relationship that's strained, or a particular problem at work, or problem musically or whatever, emotionally, then I can just write and kind of work through that. And I've had lots of times where that's led to an idea for a song, or something I write ends up being a really great line that I can use later in a song. That you're going to be different. Your mileage will vary. But for me, songwriting is so much about the message. And if you're having a hard time coming up with the message, then spend more time communicating. And that could mean communicating online. Maybe do a daily blog post where you're writing out your thoughts. Even if no one reads it, it's getting you in the habit of writing every day. And maybe it's the idea of communicating with yourself privately on a journal where you literally just write down your thoughts and document them, and nothing happens for a few days, and then suddenly you find the juices are flowing. I think the best solution really is to just do it even if you don't feel like it. It sounds like that's what you're doing. So I'd say if that is what you're doing, you're sitting down to write and you're coming up with things, it's just you're not coming up with anything that you enjoy, I'd say you're normal, and that's okay. I would say keep doing it because I think it will come. What won't happen is if you just stop writing altogether and you wait until that magical moment where you feel inspired. Yeah, you may come up with a song, but it might be 3 years from now. Whereas you could have written 150 songs in that time and probably written some great songs in the meantime too. Even if all 150 weren't great, you'd probably end up with a good 20, 30 songs that are really good. So that would be my approach. And I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of like, here I was in a funk and here's exactly what I did to fix it. But those are some things that have helped me songwriting-wise that I hope they help you as well. All right, I'll take a couple more. Dion Vargas says, which is better, buying cables like XLRs and instrument cables or building them on my own? Does the quality really make a difference when recording? So I don't know about the building your own cables. I'm not a build my own stuff kind of guy, so I just don't do it. But if you can do it and make them quality, great. But yes, quality does matter to a degree in cables. I remember when I was at Sweetwater, a buddy of mine, and I won't use the name brand because I don't want to bash anybody, but we got some free guitar cables from a manufacturer you've heard of. And he took the free cable home, and it looked like a nice cable, and he played through it, and then he swapped it out for a little bit nicer cable. So we're talking like an $8, $10 cable swapped out for a $20, $25 guitar cable. And it sounded so much better on the $20 cable. The cheaper cable sounded muffled. It just didn't have as good guts inside. I don't know the science and the engineering behind it, but it muffled the sound a lot. So that's, to me, when I worked at Sweetwater, there were kind of three brands of cables that we sold. There was the really cheap stuff, there was the kind of house brand that was middle priced, and then there was the high-end stuff like Mogami and Monster. And some people really want to go as good as they possibly can, and you can argue that the Monster cable does deliver a superior quality sound. But in my experience, I tend to go with that middle brand. I don't go bottom of the barrel. I go kind of middle of the road. So Proco cables are what I typically have. That's all I have in the studio, I think. There's a couple of Monsters in there, but for the most part, it's Proco. They're just, the Monsters to me are a little bit too expensive to justify, and the Procos hit that sweet spot where you don't feel like you're buying junk, but you're not spending top dollar. And so that's what I would get. So I hope that helps. There's usually like 3 options, and I tend to go for the middle one, which is a good marketing tactic, by the way, if you're into marketing and selling stuff. All right, Bobby Phillips says, how do you approach mixing your own song? Specifically, whoops, I just made it disappear. Specifically, I find I tend to mix other people's music better than I mix my own. Do you take time away from them after recording to give your ears a fresh perspective, or do you have any advice on that? With my own stuff, it's usually kind of mixed by the time I get to the mixing phase. What I mean by that is I'm usually adding in some EQ, some compression along the way as I'm working on it. So I'm not really starting from a clean slate mix-wise. As far as mixing other people's stuff better than mine, that very well might be true. I know in dueling mixes, a lot of times when we mix one of my songs, people tend to like Graham's mix of mine better than mine. And partially could be just because he's a great mixer and he won. Partially could be I'm too close to the song and I hear it a certain way and that's how I want it, even if that might not be the best way for the song. I don't know. I tend to think I know what's best for my baby. So I tend to like, when he's won out over my mix, I've still liked my mix better personally. Is that ego? Maybe, but I think genuinely I tend to like that better. So I don't know if I have any advice other than do what feels right. How lame is that advice? But I think it works. Final question, and this one comes from Mr. Kyle Lerman. And Kyle says, I've heard that using headphones with higher impedances can require a more amplified signal to use properly. Do you have a sense as to whether the difference is just volume, or is it tone of the headphones, or is the tone affected too? Do you know if there's a difference in the output level between USB-powered audio devices and interfaces that use AC power? Lots of questions there, and I don't exactly know. I do know, for example, these headphones that I use all the time for mixing and mastering, these are the Sennheiser HD650s, and I love them, and they're great, and theoretically they have a higher impedance, and so they theoretically need more volume to go to them, but I've always just used the stock headphone amps on my interface or my central station. So, and those tend to have a lot of volume anyway, but I've not found it to be detrimental, although I've not compared it to a really nice high wattage headphone amp to see if I'm missing out on tone. I mean, theoretically, I could see, you talk about when you're reamping guitars, that it's important to match the impedances because it does affect the tone more than just the volume. I've not experienced a lot of that, but a lot of people attest to that. So it could be the case with headphones. If you have access to a nice headphone amp, I would try that and see what you hear. But that's it for me. That's all the time I got. See ya!